Ancient Rome, a world of gladiators, emperors, and unimaginable cruelty. Justice in this empire wasn't just harsh, it was designed to make you scream. Get ready to uncover the top 10 punishments so gruesome they will make your blood run cold, in no particular order because how could we possibly rank these? Alright, starting off today we are talking about Crucifixion, which really tops the charts for being one of the most notoriously brutal punishments in ancient Rome. You're tied or nailed, yes, actual nails through the wrists and feet to a massive wooden cross. This isn't just a quick and merciful end, it is a long, drawn-out ordeal where you're left hanging. The cause of death? Typically exhaustion or asphyxiation as the body slumps and breathing becomes increasingly difficult. Reserved primarily for the worst offenders in society's eyes, like rebels, pirates, and unfortunate slaves, it was a grim fate meant to serve as a warning to others. Imagine walking down the road and seeing this macabre spectacle. It was truly an everyday reality in Roman times, meant to instill fear and obedience in the populace. Next up, we are talking about Damnatio ad bestias, or Condemnation to the Beasts. This was one of ancient Rome's more horrifying spectacles, tailor-made for the adrenaline-pumped crowds of the Colosseum. Imagine being sentenced to a gruesome end where you're tossed into a giant arena, your heart pounding as the gates creak open to unleash a fury of wild animals. Lions, bears, maybe even a leopard or two would emerge, their eyes locked on their next meal. For the audience, it was a thrilling and chilling show, a live horror drama played out under the Roman sun. The condemned, often criminals or prisoners of war, had little chance of survival and were used as human playthings to demonstrate the power of Rome and entertain the masses through sheer brutality. It was merciless and morbidly captivating, a reminder of the deadly stakes of falling out of favor in the ancient empire. Next on our list today is Decimation. This is one of those brutally straightforward Roman military practices that sounds almost too harsh to be true. Imagine a whole unit in the Roman army messes up. Maybe they fled from battle or failed a crucial task. So instead of the typical scolding or a slap on the wrist, their punishment cranks up to a grim extreme. The commanders would line them up and randomly pick one out of every 10 soldiers. Now, here's the real kicker. These unlucky guys were then executed by their own comrades, often with clubs or stones. Why such a severe punishment? Well, of course, it was all about fear and control. By making an example of a few, the Romans kept the entire unit in line, ensuring that everyone else fought harder and followed orders to a T in the future. This method just goes to show that in Roman times, discipline in the army was literally a matter of life and death. Next, we are talking about Poena cullei, or punishment of the sack. This was ancient Rome's horrific answer to the unthinkable crime of parricide, which is killing your own parent or close relative. Imagine being sewn up in a heavy leather sack, not alone, but with a motley crew of agitated animals. A snapping dog, a hissing snake, a screeching monkey, and a flustered rooster. Once everything was all stitched up, the sack and its living contents would be tossed into a river or the sea. The mix of animals wasn't just random, each represented different symbolic aspects of the crime. This very bizarre and brutal punishment combined physical suffering with psychological terror, ensuring that the condemned faced a panicky, frenzied end. It's a wildly over-the-top penalty that underscores just how seriously the Romans took the crime of destroying one's own family. Next on our list today we are talking about Fustuarium, which is another brutal military punishment. This was the Roman military's no-nonsense way of dealing with soldiers who stepped out of line by showing cowardice or by deserting their posts. Think of it as the ultimate tough love. If you messed up, your own buddies were the ones who had to beat you to death with rods or cudgels. It wasn't just about punishing the wrongdoer, it was to show everyone else in the ranks about the serious consequences of breaking the rules. This brutal method method was both a punishment and a deterrent, ensuring that soldiers remained committed in battle and loyal to their unit. It seemed like if you messed up in the Roman military, you could expect the punishment to come from those you likely just fought alongside. It's pretty dark for everyone involved, I'm not gonna lie. Next up on our list today, we are talking about Sanguis et Arena, or Blood and Sand. This sounds like it was made up just for Gladiator or 300, but in ancient Rome, this was a real life, or rather real death, for many unfortunate souls. The concept was chillingly straightforward. Gladiators, who were typically slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals, were thrown into an arena to fight until one of them died. This brutal spectacle wasn't technically a legal punishment, but made for wildly popular entertainment, drawing huge crowds who came to watch the violent clashes. For the gladiators, it was often an unintended death sentence. They'd battle it out armed with nothing but their wits and weapons on a sandy floor designed to soak up the blood. The crowd would go wild as these fighters, who trained intensely for these moments, faced off in a grim dance of death, all for the roaring approval of the spectators. It shows us quite the harsh reality of entertainment in ancient times, where human life could be just another part of the show. Also, I'm kind of just realizing now that that just is probably the most popular thing that we think of. The first thing you think of when you think of ancient Rome is the gladiator battles. So just because we don't do it anymore, I feel like we're still kind of morbidly obsessed with that. I don't know. That was just a real thought I just had that I guess I decided to just say out loud. Sometimes you just gotta say your own thoughts out loud, I guess. I don't know. Next up, we are talking about Uxoricide by molten gold. Okay, this is one of the most hair-raising punishments in ancient Rome. A corrupt official or a traitor gets caught, and as a twisted form of poetic justice, they end up with molten gold being poured down their throat. It's gruesome, right? But for the Romans, this was a simple packed way to highlight the condemned's greed, literally filling them with the wealth they so nefariously sought during their lifetime. While it sounds like something so deranged that it has to be fake, this real, rare, and extreme punishment was reserved for those whose betrayal or corruption was deemed extraordinarily severe. It was both a literal and a metaphorical representation of their sins consuming them. So next time you think about Roman punishments, remember that for them, justice was not only about retribution, but also about making a statement. Next up, we are heading over to the Tarpeian Rock. This was a notorious spot in ancient Rome that was literally the downfall of many. Perched on the southern summit of Capitoline Hill, this steep cliff was Rome's go-to spot for dealing with traitors. When someone was convicted of betrayal, they were taken to the top of this cliff and thrown off. That's really all it was. You'd think a fall like that would be a quick ticket out, but not so much. The cliff wasn't always high enough to kill someone instantly, which meant the unlucky ones faced a slow, excruciating demise as they lay broken at the base. It was a very brutal display meant to scare anyone else who thought betraying Rome might be a good idea. I'm afraid of jail now, so I would never do a crime right now because I don't want to go to jail. I don't know how people did crimes in ancient Rome. You could be thrown off a cliff? Oh my god, that's crazy. Imagine knowing that and still committing the act of betrayal. No, I'd be the most trustworthy person around. Next on our list, we are talking about breaking on the wheel, which might sound like some ancient form of extreme sports, but trust me, it's not that at all. This brutal form of punishment, though more popular in medieval times if it sounds familiar, but it actually got its start back in ancient Rome. Basically, the condemned person is tied to a gigantic wheel, kind of like a nightmarish version of a Ferris wheel. Then, using heavy clubs, executioners would give a whole new meaning to breaking a leg as they systematically shattered the victim's bones. This process was excruciatingly painful and very drawn out, leading to a death that was anything but quick. While it's a grisly spectacle to imagine, breaking on the wheel shows us a very clear example of the extreme lengths human societies have gone to in the name of justice or just a plain old public spectacle. Speaking of public spectacle, to finish off our list today, we are talking about public humiliation and death. In ancient Rome, public humiliation wasn't just a brutal punishment, it was also an entertainment event. Imagine being stripped down to nearly nothing, your mistakes on full display as you're marched through the streets. The Romans turned this into an art form where offenders, often guilty of lesser crimes, faced not just the scorn of a few, but the mockery of a crowd. This wasn't just a march of shame, it was a parade with a lethal finale. After being jeered and taunted by the masses, the final act would typically be execution, often carried out in a gruesomely creative way that kept the crowd entertained. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Bye! Alright. Punishments. This is like, I'm so glad that punishments are just doing well on B, because I just get to do so many punishments lists, and they're my favorite lists. They're so crazy. Where you're tossed into a giant, what? Fustuarium. Cudgels. Sure. Alright. Uxoricide. Tarpeian Rock. Okay.